Do you ever feel like you're constantly chasing approval, always needing someone else to tell you you're good enough? What if I told you there are people who don't live that way? Imagine a life where your peace of mind isn't dictated by your boss, your partner, or even your social circle. Instead, you operate from a place of inner security where your worth is not defined by anyone else's opinion. This video explores the psychology of those who live with this kind of self-assurance, unshaken by external validation, free to live on their own terms. The thing is, we all seek approval at some level. It's natural to want to be seen, to want to feel validated. But there's a difference between seeking affirmation to lift our spirits and letting that need control our lives. People who don't rely on constant validation have learned to develop an inner foundation, something deeper than praise or approval. They don't need the good job from a boss or the applause of a crowd to feel secure in their own worth. And for many, this freedom can seem like a distant dream. How do they get there? How can we too live with that kind of peace, where our sense of worth isn't dangling on the approval of others? It starts with developing internal confidence, a sense of self-worth that doesn't need others to affirm it. Imagine being in a work meeting where your idea isn't met with praise, but instead of feeling crushed, you stand firm.
You know that the value of your contribution isn't determined by the applause or the silence in the room. That's the kind of emotional independence that these individuals have nurtured. It's a quiet power that allows them to live their lives based on their own standards, rather than the ever-changing opinions of others. One of the most freeing aspects of this emotional independence is the ability to break free from the comparison trap. We all know the feeling of measuring ourselves against others. It's easy to look at a colleague's success or a friend's relationship and wonder if we're doing enough, if we're measuring up. But people who aren't reliant on external validation don't play that game. They know their journey is uniquely their own, and comparing it to someone else's will only dilute the sense of fulfillment that comes from focusing on their own path. They measure success by their own progress, not by how they stack up against the people around them. It's an incredibly liberating feeling, knowing that your worth isn't defined by someone else's achievements or milestones. This ability to trust their own judgment is key to their self-assurance. When you stop seeking validation, you start to trust your own instincts and decisions. You don't need constant reassurance from others to know you're on the right track. Imagine being in a relationship where you're not constantly checking for signs of affection or approval. Instead, you're secure in the bond you share, knowing that the relationship is grounded in mutual respect and understanding, not in the need for constant validation. That's the kind of strength that people who don't seek external validation possess.
Emotional resilience is another characteristic that sets them apart. These individuals know how to bounce back from rejection or criticism without letting it define them. In a world that often judges us based on our failures, it's easy to get discouraged when things don't go as planned. But people who don't seek validation take criticism in stride. They don't spiral into self-doubt when they fail. Instead, they see it as an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to adjust their approach. They understand that their worth isn't tied to their successes or failures. It's tied to who they are, deep down, beyond the praise or the rejection. One of the most beautiful aspects of this mindset is how it affects relationships. People who aren't constantly seeking validation from others tend to have deeper, more meaningful connections. They're not trying to impress anyone or win anyone's approval. Instead, they form relationships based on shared values, respect, and trust. The bond they share isn't rooted in the need for constant affirmation. It's built on something far more solid and lasting. They don't need the likes or the compliments to feel secure in their connections with others. Their relationships are authentic and grounded in mutual understanding. This kind of emotional independence also leads to a deeper level of self-reflection. Instead of relying on others to tell them how they're doing, these individuals often reflect on their own actions, choices, and growth.
After a project or an event, they don't wait for external feedback to evaluate their success. They look inward, assessing how they feel about their work and whether it aligns with their own standards. They are their own biggest critics and their own biggest cheerleaders. This inner evaluation helps them stay grounded, focused, and true to themselves, no matter what anyone else thinks. At the center of it all is a sense of intrinsic motivation. People who don't seek external validation are often driven by the satisfaction that comes from within. They pursue passions, hobbies, or careers not for the recognition or the praise, but because it fulfills them. The act itself is what matters to them. Whether or not others notice or approve is secondary. They find joy in the process, in the personal growth that comes with it, and in the sense of fulfillment that can only come from within. This kind of motivation isn't reliant on applause. It's powered by something deeper, something more personal. Setting boundaries is also a key aspect of emotional independence. It's about learning to recognize your limits and protect your energy from the draining effects of seeking approval. It's more than just saying no when you're asked to do something you don't want to do. It's about knowing when someone's opinion or judgment is starting to affect your peace of mind and being able to gently but firmly pull back. When you stop seeking validation, you start to understand the toll that constantly wondering whether you're meeting others' expectations can take on your mental and emotional health.
It's not just about rejecting external validation. It's about valuing your own time, energy, and well-being enough to set clear boundaries that prevent others from crossing them. In relationships, whether with friends, family, or colleagues, these boundaries become a powerful tool for emotional self-preservation. Imagine being in a conversation where someone's words or expectations start to feel like a weight, pushing you to conform or adjust your behavior just to be accepted or praised. People who don't rely on validation know how to step back in these moments. They don't let guilt or fear dictate their choices. Instead, they hold their ground, knowing that their worth isn't up for negotiation. They don't feel obligated to meet every expectation or to make themselves smaller to fit into someone else's version of who they should be. This ability to set boundaries in relationships is incredibly freeing. It's not about building walls or being closed off, but about creating the space to be your true self without fear of judgment or rejection. At work, this ability to set limits is just as crucial. It's easy to get caught up in the cycle of seeking approval from bosses or colleagues, to constantly try to prove your worth by going above and beyond, hoping for recognition or praise. But those who don't constantly seek validation know that their work speaks for itself. They set boundaries around their time and energy, knowing when to say no to extra tasks that don't align with their priorities or values.
They don't sacrifice their peace or sense of self to gain approval. Their confidence is built on their own understanding of their abilities, not on the recognition they receive from others. This doesn't mean they don't strive to do their best or seek constructive feedback, but their sense of accomplishment comes from knowing they did their best, not from the approval or acknowledgement of others. Even in social situations, people who don't seek constant validation are able to create healthy boundaries. They don't feel the need to be the center of attention or to mold themselves into whatever the group needs to feel accepted. They've learned to say no when needed, to protect their emotional energy from situations or people that demand more than they're willing to give. It's the freedom to express yourself authentically without the fear of judgment or the constant need to please others. In those moments, they aren't worrying about what others think of them. They're simply being themselves, secure in the knowledge that they don't need approval to be worthy of love, respect, or connection. Living without the need for validation is truly a form of liberation. It's the ability to navigate the world with a sense of calm confidence, free from the burden of measuring up to anyone's expectations. These individuals don't have to force themselves into molds to fit in. They don't need to wear masks to gain approval. They can walk into a room fully themselves without any anxiety about how they'll be perceived. And that, in itself, is incredibly powerful.
It's not just about rejecting external validation. It's about valuing your own time, energy, and well-being enough to set clear boundaries that prevent others from crossing them. In relationships, whether with friends, family, or colleagues, these boundaries become a powerful tool for emotional self-preservation. Imagine being in a conversation where someone's words or expectations start to feel like a weight, pushing you to conform or adjust your behavior just to be accepted or praised. People who don't rely on validation know how to step back in these moments. They don't let guilt or fear dictate their choices. Instead, they hold their ground, knowing that their worth isn't up for negotiation. They don't feel obligated to meet every expectation or to make themselves smaller to fit into someone else's version of who they should be. This ability to set boundaries in relationships is incredibly freeing. It's not about building walls or being closed off, but about creating the space to be your true self without fear of judgment or rejection. At work, this ability to set limits is just as crucial. It's easy to get caught up in the cycle of seeking approval from bosses or colleagues, to constantly try to prove your worth by going above and beyond, hoping for recognition or praise. But those who don't constantly seek validation know that their work speaks for itself. They set boundaries around their time and energy, knowing when to say no to extra tasks that don't align with their priorities or values.
The beauty of this shift is that it creates space for peace and fulfillment to emerge from within. It's a powerful transformation, one that leads to deeper, more authentic relationships, greater emotional freedom, and a sense of inner peace that's not dependent on external forces. So consider this. Where in your life do you find yourself seeking approval? Are there moments when you let others' opinions take up too much of your mental space? What would it feel like to begin releasing that need for validation, one step at a time? Start by recognizing where those moments happen and ask yourself why you feel the need for approval. Over time, you might find that you no longer need to look outside of yourself to feel worthy. The shift may not happen overnight, but with each small boundary you set, you'll find yourself a little more free, a little more at peace, and eventually you'll realize that you've been carrying the power of validation within you all along.